I don't want this to sound over simple or light because I know when you're going through symptoms, it's really hard to think like this, but the more lightness, fun, aliveness I can input into my life, the better. And that I would honestly call that a tool. And I think it's
Yeah.
been the main tool that I've used throughout each time a symptom comes up. Like, of course, I'm not saying that in an avoidant way. Just go have fun and ignore it all. But I think you have to know what's your tendency, right? And solution for me or something that can help is to go out and go do something fun. Go dancing, go in nature, go on a hike, go laugh with people, go do something that has nothing to do with anything too serious. Honestly, my body needs that.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to give you a quick heads up. If you've been a listener before, you might notice a bit of a shift around here. I've rebranded the podcast to How to Trust Yourself. And while the name and focus are new, the goal is the same: to help you ditch the self-doubt, listen to your gut, and actually trust yourself to create the life you want. In the past, this podcast was about chronic pain recovery and mind-body healing. And while those topics will still come into the conversation, I'm now focusing on helping people like you tap into that inner guidance when you're finally ready to connect with your purpose and go after those goals you've been holding off on, whether it's because you're scared of getting burned out again, of triggering chronic symptoms, or beating yourself up when things don't go as planned. If that sounds like what you need right now, you're in the right place. Welcome back, dear listener. In today's episode, I got to chat with a colleague who I got to meet in person for the first time recently, which was pretty magical. Lauren Garchow is a psychotherapist, mind-body coach, and chronic pain survivor based in Los Angeles, California. Her chronic pain healing journey revealed the mind's powerful ability to change and adapt, igniting her passion to support others in their mind-body healing. With over a decade of experience in the social work field, she currently owns a private practice where she focuses on helping women feel at home in their bodies. She has successfully guided numerous clients through diverse chronic pain challenges and physical symptoms, with a focus on providing relief for those who struggle with dizziness. She helps clients understand the connections between individual, family, community, and societal systems, empowering them to explore their minds and bodies with curiosity and compassion. Lauren deeply values balance in her life, and in order for her to show up wholeheartedly in this work, she prioritizes having a full life outside of it. She loves listening to live music and currently leads live music shows for up-and-coming artists in Los Angeles. A big part of her healing journey was learning to have more fun and lighten up on herself. So making time for community, play, and creativity is crucial for her in maintaining her mind-body connection. When Lauren and I spoke, we covered all of the above, plus she shared her experience with a major relapse in chronic pain and how that relapse, which is a very common experience, by the way, actually taught her more about the healing process, which she's about to share with you in this conversation. Lauren, it's so lovely to see you again. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm excited too. And I'm glad that we met in person before we're meeting on this podcast, which is not always the case. Us mind body folk tend to be spread out across the world and the country.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd love to start by asking you to share with this audience what it is that you do and who you help.
Yeah. So I'm a psychotherapist, LCSW. And for those that doesn't know what that means, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a mind body coach. And I specialize in helping women feel at home in their bodies.
Mm, a much, much needed thing in this world. And I know that, like myself and like so many people in this field, it's really like, I think something very specific about this field that most practitioners come into it through our own recovery experience. I'm not really sure if there are any other fields where that's so much the case. I know
Mhm.
that's been the case for you, and I'd love to hear a bit about that story, how you came to be doing this work.
Definitely. Yes. And, I was really thinking about this today and I wanted to be really intentional about how I told my story. Um, I think oftentimes what I hear from clients is they hear these recovery stories and sometimes they feel helpful, but a lot of times they turn into feeling like a reason that clients will turn it into their own failure. Right. So,
Yes, I hear
almost
this a lot too. I'm so glad you're bringing that up.
yeah, and I've really been thinking about that because I hear it so often. And I'm like, is there something we could be doing differently in this field to help with that? Right. And one thing that I came up with is we often tell one snapshot of the story, and it's the most miraculous part. And I do have a part of my story that did feel very miraculous.
Yeah.
But today I will tell that part, but I also want to tell the continued story, the evolution to where I am now. And the continuous mind body journey I'm on. I think sometimes that's the parts that's missing. It could really help some people to hear that.
Yes, and by the way, I wanna say it it can and will, I'm sure, help everyone who is listening, and that includes other practitioners, because this is actually something I hear not
Mhm.
only from clients or students, but also from colleagues, and it's a conversation I've had with many colleagues. You know,
Mhm.
we have all heard these stories, and I've had lots of conversations with colleagues about, like, are you quote unquote completely recovered? It's like, I get symptoms all the time. Like, I don't know what this means, this like, 100% pain-free thing. So
Mhm.
I am very appreciative that you're framing it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I love to hear, speaking of the PPDA conference that we were both at, which for those that don't know is like our big mind body, what would you call it, governing body kind of.
Yeah,
um,
association. Yeah.
Association, yeah. A lot of us have built off the work of John Sarno, and hearing his daughter emphasize at the conference, John Sarno himself she's like, he had aches and pains all the time,
Yes, that's
all
right.
the time. And she said, but he continuously was a good example for myself and clients of just treating himself kindly and being like, okay, here's another symptom. What do I need to do to take care of myself? But just sitting in the audience, I was like, thank you for saying that. It made me feel very seen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have found that the more I or every time I talk about the fact that I still experience symptoms and, I'm still a human being and I always will be a human being,
Yeah.
I find it's appreciated. There's kind of a sigh of relief in the room.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So with all that being said, I will actually answer your question. um, so I developed severe chronic back pain in my younger 20s. And I was right in the middle of college. I was a healthy person. I was involved in dance team. I, really enjoyed volunteering and doing social justice things at the time. And then I got hit with this back pain and seemingly came out of nowhere. right? Now that I look back, I can see all the different emotional triggers for it, right? But I had back pain before growing up as well, and it would take me out a little bit, but nothing to this extent. So this back pain got so bad that maybe for 4 or 5 years, it just completely took over my life. In college, I'd be standing in 3-hour lectures because sitting hurt so bad. I couldn't drive at some points. My roommate would drive me around. And, like many people, I tried everything, shots and massages and physical therapy and all the things. I always like to, it's crazy to think back now at some of the things that I tried. I mean, I tried one massage from this ex bodybuilder woman. She worked with a lot of athletes, and I was like, this is going to be my fix, right? And
Yeah.
um, the way she massaged, my entire body was bruised. I have
Ooh,
pictures. I was
yeah.
black and blue all over. And it's kind of funny looking back because I had a doctor friend at the time that she's like, do you think you're just in so much pain that you're just distracted from the original pain? Because it hurts
Right.
so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I just give that example to be, to show how many things I really tried at the time to fix this. But it wasn't until grad school or right when I was about to start, I was looking at my professors as the very type A student I was, checking them out, seeing, who I was going to learn from. And Alan Gordon's name popped up for one of my just intro classes. And I was like, that name sounds kind of familiar, but I can't think of how. And then an image came to me of being in a doctor's office. So amongst all these practitioners I saw, one time my mom, when I was visiting home in Michigan, said, she took me to this more holistic doctor. And that doctor gave me a one-page pamphlet on Alan Gordon's work before
Oh,
PRT was even a thing. Um, but as many chronic pain sufferers do, I looked at it. I said, this has nothing to do with my mental health.
yeah.
Put it to the side. And that was that for the moment. But then fast forward again. So that's how I recognized his name. Right. And so, like,
Mm.
okay, this is kind of coming full circle here. Still was very wary of it at the time. This whole thing was very woo woo to me. It just didn't really make that much sense. But I started reading about his work a little bit that night. And it was the moment when I started reading about the personality types that really
Yeah.
develop chronic symptoms that I was like, oh, this is resonating with me a little bit.
Mm.
And I think something cracked open that in me that day that was a little bit more open to this work. On top of trying everything else and not so.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting that you encountered Alan Gordon's work before PRT, which stands for pain reprocessing therapy, was
Mm,
formalized into something that has become, it's getting more and more widely known.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It was actually when he was doing the big boulder pain study that I was in his class. So he was coming back. The class had nothing to do with chronic pain, but he just was so excited. He would share with us, look at what's happening in the study I'm doing. Yeah. So,
huh,
yeah, I guess so to continue, um, first day of class just told him, hey, I'm Lauren, I have chronic back pain, blah, blah, blah. And he is a really nonchalant guy for anyone that knows him. And he said, yeah, oh, I have a free wiki program. It's like a 21-day program. Just try it. If you need more, maybe I can set you up with somebody in my center. And I just had nothing left to lose. So I was like, okay. And I think I might have done like a week or two of it. I didn't finish it. But after that week or two, after 5 years of chronic back pain, it was just gone.
wow. Is that the miraculous feeling
Yeah.
part of your
Yeah.
story? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty miraculous.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I think I was just more stunned, and I didn't know what to believe because I was so not a believer in this before. I just thought it was
Yeah.
wacky. So to go that drastically from this is wacky to whoa, I don't have back pain.
It's really wild. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's very hard for anyone to comprehend who hasn't had an experience like that. And actually, I think most listeners to this podcast have some grounding in the idea of mind body recovery. But there may be a listener for whom this conversation is their first introduction.
Mhm.
And with what you know now, I mean, now you're working in this field, looking back, how would you explain to someone who is new to this stuff what happened? Like, how did your back pain disappear at that point?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that question. And it's something that I've gotten to reflect on a lot as the years pass with this. So I think a big part of the more miraculous or quick part of, my story and my recovery was the place in life I was at.
Mm,
And I think that's important to know because it's not always just the tools and people get so
yeah.
frustrated. Why are these tools not working? Right. And I was just starting grad school, like I was saying. I was moving past some fears and just entering something new, right? Grad school was scary to start and it was a process to get into. And um, at that time, I think I was just ready to open up and to do
Mm,
new things, make new friends, challenge myself, right? And this was just one part of that, one aspect of it. So I think I had an openness already that was there.
yeah.
Um, but as far as what I, do remember doing in as I was reading through this wiki program was just sitting in the car because driving was a continuous trigger for me. Part of my life there was highs and lows, and I was able to live life in certain ways, but driving just remained really tough for me. And so I was driving to and from class, and I was like, "This is really weird," but he says to say, "I'm safe," like
Mm,
I'm okay. And so I just remember driving in the car and saying, "I'm safe." Like, "Oh yeah, my pain is here, but I'm safe. I'm all right. I'm just driving."
mm,
And eventually, like, it really didn't take long for that to just click, and the pain to disappear in that way. So those are just some aspects I've thought about that were helpful to me in that moment. So I think everybody's brain has a moment that it really believes that it's okay. Right.
yeah.
So for me, both the, tools I was trying and just life, I think I was just challenging myself and knowing that it was going to be okay. Because one of the best ways we can prove to our brains that we're going to be okay is to challenge ourselves and then be okay.
Yes. And just a little like Cliff's notes for someone who's very, very new to this idea of mind body recovery. One of the pieces of this framework is the conceptualization of pain as a danger signal. It's a danger signal that the nervous system will fire off when it senses danger or threat. And so what you're saying is you were purposefully feeding your nervous system a different message that you were
Mhm.
not in danger, you were not under threat, and you were in fact safe so it could let its guard down.
Yeah, 100%. That was beautifully put. Yes. And it, wasn't at a time in my life that was just beautifully easy either. I want to emphasize that. Sometimes people are like,
Mm.
well, my life is busy and I have things to do. And yeah, I was just starting grad school, right? But
Yeah.
it was the mindset of like, I'm okay. This is like, a good thing that I'm trying all these new things, including the tools, right?
Yes. It's, I feel like that's something we encounter in every facet of life and at every stage of life. There's always going to be new things. There's always going to be at each life stage new challenges and stepping into the unknown. I think almost always feels scary at first. And it takes a real intentional shift in self-talk to coach ourselves through it to say, no, actually, I'm choosing to do this. Yes, it's unknown. And
Yeah.
that's exciting.
Yes, which is
Yeah.
not my go-to. I just really wanna
No, not mine
emphasize
either.
that. Transitions are tough. I identify a label that's been really helpful for me is highly sensitive, and for those that don't know, it's just there's a subset of the population that we take sensory input in different ways, right? We're really attuned to our surroundings, and that's beautiful and also can be really overwhelming, right? So transitions for me are like I am always going to go to like work or first off, I'm going to go to worst case scenario. I'm going to go to a lot of pressure on myself. Like when things get hard in life, a pattern I've noticed is just putting it all on myself. How much can I take on? Oh, it must be something I'm doing. So to make that shift to, hey, this is a transition, but like what can I make of it? This is a good thing, is not does not come easily, but it's something that over time has become easier to me.
Yeah. I'm curious about something because there's a phrase I've been playing with inside my own head recently. You mentioned that you identify as a highly sensitive person, or HSP as the acronym goes. And I think many, if not most people who experience mind body symptoms, many of us identify that way. I would say I do as well. Um, and I've been thinking, there's a lot of crossover between highly sensitive and highly successful. There's a lot of HSHSPs out there because a lot of these, what you were describing, putting pressure on yourself, highly attuned to just everything around you. These are things that, in many contexts, can bring success in academia, in work. And for that reason, it can be extra hard to convince ourselves to let go of that tight grip when
Mhm.
we're introduced to these mind body concepts. And I'm curious if that was something that you encountered.
Yes. Okay, first of all, HSP. I love that. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down after this. But you are so right. I think it's two sides of the same coin, right? Um, I've thought about this a lot, actually transitioning to doing my own private practice full time too. I mean, it's been going really well. I was terrified to do this. I don't think I thought I would ever be a business owner, but I'm here and it's actually a lot smoother than things I've done in the past. And so, I was like, oh, wait, I can rely on myself and it can go well. But I like,
Yeah.
like you're saying, it's also like I do kind of put a lot of pressure on things. So that part of me has helped a lot too. I just need to know how to rein it in. Right.
Yeah.
But yes, that is definitely something I've experienced. And, in my story that I was just talking about a moment ago, that is the part of it. Like I was in that part of life where I could bring a little bit more lightness to the tools and be like, actually, I don't have to practice this in a really pressured way. And I think it helped actually that I thought the whole thing was a little bit, it was unsure about this whole mind body approach because I was like, this
Yeah.
is weird. I'm driving and I'm feeling myself unsafe. But that in turn helped take the pressure down.
Yeah. You know what? I really love that too, specifically because one of the things folks often put pressure on themselves about when they dive into this mind body work
Mhm.
is, one of the messages is you have to believe for it to work. And I know the purpose of this idea and the
Mhm.
usefulness of it. The flip side of it is folks can heap tons of pressure on themselves, like, oh, I don't fully believe. And so that means I'm failing at it and it's not going to go well. So you're sharing a really great example of how holding it really lightly can actually benefit you.
Yes, definitely. And I think, that is how I could hold it then. I
Yeah.
have more parts to my story that I can share now or as it comes up
Yes.
as we talk that I
Let's
did not
go there.
yeah, I did
Let's
not.
go there because that's where this all started, is that the story had this miraculous part of it, but that was certainly not
Mhm.
the whole picture. And it's not for most people.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's why I find it so important to talk about. I think for the majority, it's not like that because, like you said, we're
Yeah.
humans. And just like anything else, you go through one hardship in life, and that doesn't, you become stronger and you become more resilient and you maybe become more tender with yourself or more knowing of yourself, right? But doesn't mean no hardships will come in the future. So yeah, I had this miraculous recovery. And then for a few years after that, again, stressors in life, being in grad school, of course, but I was having fun. I was letting go and really trying things for the first time and living my life in a way I didn't let myself do before. And that was really scary. But on the other side of it was a lot of fun. But over the years, I really learned to relate to my body, yeah, in a more low stress way. So when different aches or pains or things, anything, sensations in my body would come up, I could meet them more as, oh, okay, well, it's probably going to go away. That's what I just tell myself a lot.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, whatever this is going to go away because I had so much belief from that first time that that happened. And that kept me coasting for a while there of just like breaking out of that pain fear cycle. And pain doesn't have to mean the alarm bells, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I stayed there for a bit until a few years later during COVID. Um, I was going through a lot, as so many of us were, on a larger scale, but also personally. Just had some friendships that were ending and shifting. Like the closest people in my life, my orbit felt
Mm.
like it was really getting shaken.
Yeah.
And I had some weird foot pain come up. I don't know if my feet have ever hurt like that before,
Mm.
but just like I had learned to do, I was like, "Hmm, this is weird. It'll go away." Right? I got so used to being able to say that and it worked. Right? But this time I said that and it didn't go away. And the next week it didn't go away. And I'm like, okay, wait, I'm not responding with fear. I'm genuinely not scared. And I was even in therapy at the time, not mind body therapy, but I was like, I'm taking care of myself in, ways that I haven't before. This is a hard time, but I started getting really confused and then very frustrated with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it spread from my feet to my hands, and then I started getting sucked right back into the cycle. And then it started to become scary again because I said, "Wait, my tools are not working. The tools that I know and have worked for me are not working," and that's a scary place to be.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful to have you here sharing this story with listeners because although our stories are all very different and unique in their details, there's a theme here that many, many listeners will relate to. And uh, perhaps they're in that moment right now of like, maybe these tools are not appropriate for what I'm experiencing now because it's not quote unquote working the way that it used to.
Yep, yep, exactly. And I find that a lot of clients that come to me, it might be a part of like a relapse, right? They're like, "Yeah, I had some symptoms a few years ago, and I did these things but now I'm trying the same stuff and it's not working and I'm really confused and I need somebody to help me." And that's exactly what I did too.
Yeah.
I had to get out of that therapy I was in because she was really fueling my fear. She was not familiar
Mm.
with mind bodies. She's like, "Are you sure you shouldn't go to the doctor? Maybe you have an autoimmune thing." And that was scary because I was trying to keep the confidence of like, no, I don't even want to label this. Like it could have probably had a lot of different labels, fibromyalgia, kind of felt arthritis-y, right? So but I was
Yeah.
like, I don't want any of that because I had an inner knowing that it was mind body. I just didn't know how to get there. And I was feeling really at a loss on how to do it by myself. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so
Oh, by
yeah.
the way, I think that inner knowing piece, it's so important.
Mhm.
How do you identify when something is an inner knowing versus like a fear-based avoidance, for example?
Mhm. Oh, that's a good question. I'm like to be really genuine and transparent with people. I think it's really helpful. I don't think I know that in the moment
Yeah.
often. And I still think I'm working on that. It's mostly in retrospect that I can see that. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
called it an inner knowing then, probably, but I can look back and say I did have it. And I think the more times I can repeatedly after the fact notice what was inner knowing, I think that helps me as I move along. To have that feeling of it. Be like, okay, now that I can see it from the outside looking in, that was inner knowing. And in this experience, that was inner knowing. And then in this experience, that was inner knowing. It
Yeah.
can add up over time. And that's a part of this process is like continually getting to know yourself on a deeper and deeper level.
Yes. And you get feedback, right? Like it's you follow a hunch
Mhm.
and then you get information from following that hunch and you make your next best guess based on that.
Right. And I have to constantly remind myself of that. I'm just making my best guess. I mean, that whole conversation between intuition or fear. It's like you're still making your best guess in the moment. That's
Yeah,
okay. So, like, nothing in life has 100% certainty, right? So,
that is true.
yeah, nothing. And I think that brings more freedom
Yeah.
to me than getting really rigid about, is this intuition and inner knowing or is it fear? Because I get stuck in that all the time. Yeah, so I just followed what felt better to me in the moment, right? And I still, you know, had a moment where I was still going a little structural. I didn't go to the doctor. I knew that was going to be helpful for me, but I was getting massages on my feet and I was telling myself, well, I know this is mind body. I'm just like, I'm genuinely in pain. So maybe the foot massages can just help me be more
Yeah,
comfortable, right, during this.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So, I think I just needed support at the time. My inner circles were shifting in a way that I didn't want. So I needed someone there to hear me repeat myself 20 million times in those sessions.
Yeah.
Bless my therapist at the time. I think back now being on the other end and I was like, whoo, I was really going through it and giving her a lot in the sessions. But um this time was really interesting because, and this is a pattern I see in clients too. I find that oftentimes someone's first healing journey, some people can get out of that with just breaking the pain fear cycle, right? Like the less I fear my pain,
Yeah.
the less pain I'm going to have. So that was my story the first time. The second time, it was more, I had to get into some deeper emotional wounds. Right. And
Yes.
that's a pattern I see with clients
Oh,
too.
yeah. Same. And in
Yeah.
fact, I'll just say briefly in my own recovery story, I didn't have so much of a miraculous initial recovery, but the first layer of like intensity and frequency of migraine attacks, which was my thing, the first layer of intensity lifted through breaking the fear pain cycle. That was really significant. But then for it to keep going, like exactly like you're saying, I needed to delve into some deeper emotional work. And that does seem to be a very common pattern.
It does. It does. And so I like to normalize that for clients too when they're coming in. They're like, why isn't it working? I say that. I say, this is what happened to me. I see this happening a lot. So it does not mean that you're hopeless in this moment. It just means that we're going to, you know, find some new pockets of ways to approach this. And oftentimes that makes people feel a lot better. I mean, the emotional work is tough, don't get me wrong, but it's it's something to point to. It's hope there that,
It's tough. And tell me what you think, but in my opinion, it is so much more powerfully transformative than just that. I say just, I mean, it's a big deal to to work on the fear pain cycle and to loosen that up is a big deal. And I find that it's the deeper emotional work that really starts to change everything in one's life beyond the symptoms. I don't know how you feel about it.
yeah, I mean, my life changed pretty drastically with the first time around too, but yes, that is what I mean, again, each time something comes up, it's an opportunity to delve deeper into ourselves and be even more compassionate or understanding. And that's going to last a lifetime, right? So yes, I totally agree with you. And then you're starting to look at, okay, yeah, what outside of just this pain is contributing to my body to respond in the way that it is, right? And I think, that second time around, I just had to learn um, just kind of like acceptance. I'm someone that
Yeah.
can fall into very like obsessive thought patterns, right? So um, I was obsessing then over like, why isn't this working and what's going on? And, just stuck in these loops of obsession and really interesting this time around with the hand foot pain. Did get pretty intense too. I would take my shoe off when I was driving. And I think a particularly frustrating experience when you've already been through mind body symptoms once is like I knew that taking off my shoe like wasn't going to like it wasn't the issue, right? So then I was frustrated with myself of like, well, I know
Mm.
I don't want to take off my shoe because I know I'm trying to teach my brain that it's safe and I'm not in danger, but my foot hurts and my shoe is uncomfortable, right? So
Yeah.
there's then this balance that people have to find of, okay, when do I just meet myself where I'm at and just take off
Yes.
the shoe
Yes.
versus, but when you know all of these things and what's the
Mm.
quote unquote right thing to do, it can get, I turned it into a way to just be really hard on myself.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do. I mean, I find, yeah, knowing more can be a double-edged sword. The more we know, the more opportunities we have to use that knowledge and also more opportunities to whack ourselves over the head with it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, I think the second time around, I just had to learn to like really accept, and I think it really solidified compassion for myself. Yeah, it continued, and then I had an experience. I was dating at that time, and I had an experience one night um with someone I'd been on a date on that made me deeply uncomfortable physically. That's a light way of putting it, but
Mm.
I was really feeling scared in my body. And I woke up the next morning. Of course, the feet and hand pain is very high.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember that moment of just being like, it's okay. Of course you feel this way. Of course you're doing this symptoms. Of course you're on fire. That was horrible. That was scary. You didn't
Mm.
like that. And I felt like that was the first time in that run that I was giving myself a message of safety that was coming from a genuine place.
Mm.
Yeah.
I got chills when you said that actually, because I mean, I was feeling such compassion for you as you shared this snippet of a story. And what I think I'm hearing you say is that you gave compassion from a genuine and deep place to yourself.
Mhm. Yes, yes. I was really trying to force it the whole time, and in that moment, I wasn't trying to fix it. I wasn't trying to make it go away. I just accepted that, yeah, it's happening. And honestly, after that moment, I don't know if it was the day later or whatever, this tends to be part of my story, and this is not everybody's story, but the hand and foot pain went away. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. I'm curious. I mean, there's just probably about a bazillion takeaways that you have from this relapse and recovery experience. W- What's one or a few that come to mind? Like what did you make of that experience once you had had this initial miraculous feeling recovery and then the relapse and a very different in nature recovery experience?
Yeah. Yeah, so many takeaways from it probably, but one of when people are experiencing relapse or symptom imperative, right, where one symptom might go away and another one pops up, one of the most helpful things I think that we can say to our brains is this will pass. I don't know when or how, but it will pass. And that always takes my pressure level down like 10 notches.
Yeah.
Will pass. I don't know when, too. That's the important part. Because if I try to control when and how these are going to go away, they're not going to go away. Right. So, how can I meet myself in this moment?
Mm. I love that. Hearing you say that, I was thinking, because I've been there. Anyone who's listening to this has probably been there.
Mhm.
And that's the challenging part is to allow the not knowing when or how, because when we're in fear and we're in contraction, we want to know when and how, and we want that certainty. And
Mhm.
yet it's that holding tight to that need for certainty is
Mhm.
keeping all that tension in place or it's exacerbating it.
Mhm.
And when you said, I just needed to meet myself there, I really relate to that. And I found when I was in the kind of like my recovery from migraine, it's quite similar in some ways, quite different in some ways. I never had this like moment where there was just then, a full remission. And I still experience mild to moderate head tension when I'm
Mhm.
stressed, but it's like nowhere near what it used to be. It's not this thing that takes over my life. Um, but there was this period of my recovery when it was like I had recovered so much, but it was still a part of my life that was a preoccupation, and that just annoyed the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Um, and what really helped me during that stretch of time was to ask myself, like, okay, maybe I can't even get myself to a place where I'm okay with the sensation I'm feeling right now, but can I love myself in this moment anyway? And that's what I related to from, can I meet myself here?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up too, Anna, because the story actually is not over there. So I know that I had another one of those where it's like I did this and then it went away, right? But actually, similar to your head tension, back pain, I think when I kicked that one to the curb, it just really kicked to the curb. I just rarely ever have back pain. I think it was just such a powerful experience for my body that if I do have a twinge, it really goes away quite quickly. But
Yeah.
this hand and foot pain is another story. That one hasn't really quite, it did go away for a stretch, like I said, but yeah, similar to your head tension, it still visits me. And I now wake up most days with that tension in my hands and feet. And at first, I was frustrated, and that just made it all the worse, as we know. Um, but similar to you, once I let go of that and was like, I don't know why it's here. I know some people it's really helpful to like journal and get right to the root of it. For me, and I think for other more obsessive thinkers that can fall easily into that pattern, usually never a helpful question for me to ask until I'm more removed from it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to, even if I'm doing it gently, like I want to dive deeper here. Nope. I really just have to get into my body and find some safety. And so once I started doing that, I mean, the hand and foot pain, or I just call them sensations now, or a little bit of discomfort, it's lessened a lot. And I don't really care that it's there because it's so light right now, right? Like, and again, I don't know when it's going to go away, but I've let go of like, oh, I'm failing because this is here. I'm just like, I don't know. I'm a human. It's here. And what can I put into practice to help myself feel safer? And, it's been happening in the morning. So one way I've been approaching it is doing 10 minutes of movement or yoga in the morning to just help my body feel a little bit less shaky as I move into the day. But again, that's all I can do is just meet myself where I'm at. And for me, just like making it simple and staying in the moment and meeting myself is been honestly key as I continue. Yeah.
And I am, again, just so appreciative of you being here and sharing this. And, it was just, I think yesterday, I was privy to a conversation in a Facebook group for other practitioners. And there was a conversation that's certainly not unique. This conversation happens all the time. A practitioner was expressing worry about being able to really adequately provide hope of recovery for their clients because they themselves are still experiencing symptoms. And of course, myself and a host of other practitioners piled into the comments with supportive words about it. Actually, it's really helpful for your clients if you share that you're a human being and you experience sensations in your body, because we're all putting pressure on ourselves, and that pressure is not doing us any favors.
Yes. Yes. And for anyone who's like listening and not watching and wondering why we're being so giggly, it's because I saw the same post and
Oh, yeah.
I was really,
Yeah.
drawn to it, and I almost
Yeah.
commented as well. But then I saw everybody was in there saying their thing, and I was like, okay, think we're good here. But
Yes.
I was so moved by the comments, and again, it reinforced for me, just as a human and a practitioner and coach too, that just seeing all the comments of practitioners like, oh yeah, when I started my practice, all my symptoms came back, and just really normalizing that, I felt it was a beautiful thread. So I'm really glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this. I want to ask you this question that I ask most people who come on the podcast, which is what are some of the specific tools and techniques that have been most helpful to you in your recovery? I ask this to really illustrate the point that there's no one size fits all. And I also want to just pick up on something you said just a moment ago that, like, sometimes, quote unquote, doing the work, and like trying to get to the bottom of it is not helpful to you. And sometimes it's about what we're not doing more so than what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so I guess I can also start with, yeah, what doesn't work for me. I think, and this is also something I've seen clients be really frustrated with coming in is like, I'm not a big journaler. I do journal sometimes, but like the whole journaling that's like really trying to get to the root of it, oh my gosh, I just stress myself out like no other. And I've met so many people that do the same. And me saying that also doesn't negate how powerful of a tool that is for people. Like you do writing
Mm.
workshops and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. I know that's been one of your main aspects of healing, right? For me, it really has been, and I don't want this to sound over simple or light, because I know when you're going through symptoms, it's really hard to think like this. But the most honestly I can answer is the more lightness, fun, aliveness I can input into my life, the better. And that I would honestly call that a tool. And I think it's
Yeah.
been the main tool that I've used throughout each time a symptom comes up. Like, of course, I'm not saying that in an avoidant way. Just go have fun and ignore it all. But I think you have to know what's your tendency, right? And some people's tendency is to avoid and maybe go drink away pain or go, party away pain, or, those are some extreme, like externalizing examples. But I know my obsession, I think we all have obsessions or addictions in a way, right? Some people are addicted to external substances like alcohol, and some people have internal addictions. I get very addicted to my thoughts and morality and doing things right. And so for that addiction, actually, the solution for me or something that can help is to go out and go do something fun. I'm not saying get blackout drunk or anything like that, but go dancing, go in nature, go on a hike, go laugh with people, go do something that has nothing to do with anything too serious. Honestly, my body needs that because I can just go from 0 to 100 with my intensity and my seriousness, I guess. Yeah.
I love that you said you have to know what your tendency is. And I thought, yeah, it's important to know what our tendencies are and to honor that. And, I've spoken about this many times earlier on in my work as a practitioner. I had, like you said, I had found that journaling was a really effective way in for me. And I found, I learned about journaling from Nicole Sax's work. I from there developed a particular style of doing it that really works for me. I shared it with clients, many of whom found it really helpful. And then I found that there were some clients who really weren't vibing with it. And in the beginning, my thought was, well, I just have to help them, kind of get into it from the right angle and then it'll be supportive to them. And those clients taught me that actually, no, there is no one size fits all. And trying to, just kind of really force it, honestly, is the opposite of therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
So it's really important to honor what works for us and what doesn't work for us, too.
Yeah, and nothing, again, we're talking about not having 100% certainty or 100% black and white. Like I said, I still try journaling and I still, I think it is a great way to get, deeper into your psyche and things like that. And, I've learned that you can do it voice messaging. I'm much more of a verbal processor than I am, a written processor. So, there's different ways to do it, but it's just knowing, okay, what is like my really go to though to help my body feel safe? I know journaling is a challenge for me that can be helpful, but if I am at a 10 out of 10, like dysregulation, or that's not what's going to help me. I need to go outside. I need to sit in the sun. I need to move my body, right? So we can also have tools that it's like, this is my go-to and this is what feels more natural to me. And if I want to challenge myself, maybe I'll, dabble into this one.
Thank you so much for sharing your particular special sauce because we all have it and we all need to find our own. Um, as you know, I call this podcast From Chronic Pain to Passion. And the reason I call it that is because this journey generally starts with pain. Pain is what draws us into it, and it's that desire to get rid of what we're perceiving as a problem.
Mhm.
And as we get further into the work, it stops being so much about the pain, and it starts being about other things. And it starts becoming oftentimes a blossoming into our purpose, our passions, our interests, our authenticity, our boundaries, our, whatever it is. And I'm curious how you would relate to that idea in your experience.
Yeah. Yes. I know one of my favorite things about your flavor doing this work is how much you bring in creativity, right? Because we're all creative humans, and um, anxiety and creativity are just two sides of the same coin, too, right? You
Mm,
have all this energy in you. It's like, where
yes.
is it going? And if it doesn't have an outlet, then it
Woo,
might turn into anxious thoughts.
gotta chill. Yes.
Uh, yes. So, yeah, I'm really happy that you're bringing that up. Um, for me, like I mentioned with the big chronic back pain moment and then the transition, like I mentioned earlier, I think I was just learning to have a lot more fun and carefreeness in life. Um, I was definitely in that good girl box. I got very religious growing up. It wasn't helpful to me. It was very rigid, and not even the way I was learning it, the way I was taking it in was just, I made it very rigid. I put myself in a box that I felt like it was keeping me safe. Or it was my
Yeah.
best attempt at being safe in an uncertain world, but it did not keep me safe. It kept me very stressed out and very fearful. Right. So I think for me, it really was stepping out of that good girl box,
Mm,
challenging myself to things that, I previously feared. And that all happened through this process, right? I mean, I keep going back to grad school. I made some new friends. I, you know, just loosened up a little bit and try new things and put myself out there in ways that I wouldn't before. And I'm not giving specific examples because this could be seen either way, but I didn't drink at all. I was just very rigid, and I started drinking a little bit, in a healthy way. And it's, again, just know your tendencies. My tendency is to get very rigid in one way, right? And um so I started just like being like, oh, this is not so bad to do these things that I put in a box of my like ultra religious self and good girl image and all these things, right? And I think one thing I hear from clients is that if they're one way, they're scared if they dip their tone another way, they're going to go to an extreme. Like, I
mm.
didn't go to extreme. I didn't become I didn't become addicted to alcohol. I didn't become, anything like that. I just loosened up a little bit and enjoyed my life in a way that I wasn't before. But that's going to look different for everybody.
I love that part of your story is just centers fun. I really enjoy that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and drinking's not the only outlet for that, right? But
of
um,
course. It's a
yeah,
part of the spectrum. Yeah.
yeah, it's part of the spectrum, and we can normalize that. There's lots of different ways that we exist that are helpful for some people and unhelpful for others. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think just and like I said, even being in grad school and every time I take a risk, right? I mean, fear is my go-to. I don't know who's seen Inside Out, but Inside Out 2 is just such a cute movie to me and so accurate in this mental health space, right? So
Yeah.
I think of what emotions in my driver's seat most of the time, and it is fear. So every time I choose to um, take a risk, have a little bit of fun, it puts fear. It says, okay, fear, you can go take a break. We're gonna do this now. And I think that's what fun does for me. When I put more like happiness or fun in the driver's seat, fear can take a seat, you know. But I've had, conversations with friends that are like, yeah, I think happiness is in my driver's seat to the
Mm.
point where my other emotions don't get to have a moment and
Oh,
happiness
yeah.
takes over. So yeah.
Yeah. And again, I just appreciate how you describe that what works for you doesn't have to be the same exact things that work for others. It's so much about getting to know ourselves and where, where we've gotten stuck in a particular kind of rigidity and what will help us uniquely and personally wiggle out into something that feels a little bit more flexible.
Yeah, definitely. And so, I think as my journey continues, as I've kind of been going in these chunks of my journey, now having my own practice and shifting, doing that full time, I love the way that I'm able to use my creativity and my passion to put it into this, right? And like I said, I did not come into social work thinking, well, first of all, that I would be doing private practice at all. The second of all, that I would be owning my own practice. I was like, no, I don't need to do that, all the things. And now here I am. And I've been having this very full circle moment of like, wait, I have so many attributes that I felt like the last few years I was kind of missing out on too. I kept saying, I don't really feel like I'm reaching my potential, or I don't
Mm,
really feel like I'm, yeah, doing that. And so again, it was really scary. So I had to step on the other side of fear. And that's where like my creativity and my leadership abilities and my all these different skills that I didn't get to use with just being a therapist or coach, right? When you own your own practice, there's just a lot of opportunities to do stuff like this, right? And it's so fun. So
and I personally find it kind of fascinating that not all, but a lot of people who enter into this recovery journey wind up in entrepreneurship on the other side of it. And I find that fascinating.
that is actually so true, and I feel like I've just been resisting it, I my partner has heard me say so many times, "I'm not an entrepreneur, like, I'm not a business owner, that's just not me." Because I think the uncertainty of it is something that really scares my heart, It's
Yeah.
really I like consistency, I liked having a paycheck, that I knew was coming every 2 weeks, I could have a bad day, and it would still be there, right? Like, that felt really good to me. But
Yeah.
again, on the other side of this, I'm like, "Wait, I'm having a much better time than I even expected," but I couldn't have gotten there if I didn't transition through that fear, and it wasn't pretty at
Yeah.
first, but here we are.
Um, One of my final questions for you is if there is a soapbox message that you are personally passionate about spreading through the work that you do, what would that message or one of them be?
Ah, man, probably have a lot of soapbox messages. I think one of them is, just telling people that are going through chronic pain or chronic symptoms, you will get back to the things you enjoy.
Mm.
You will. And you can actually start doing that now too. And I know that's a really hard thing to hear sometimes.
I felt that in my body just hearing you say that. It's so useful to be able to lean into the confidence and reassurance of someone else who's also walked this path.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
You will get back to the things that you enjoy. And can you create little joy pockets now too?
Yeah.
I think for me, the more I can been able to step into like a more powerful stance rather than a fearful stance and a confident stance, even if I don't believe it at all. Just and again, with experience is how I think we often learn that. We can tell ourselves things all day, but if you can do one little thing that doesn't scare you too much, that you're over your threshold, right? But one thing that you haven't been able to do because of your pain or your dizziness or whatever is holding you back. Can you do one of those things this week and just see what it does to your body or your mind?
Yeah. For the listener who is really being introduced to mind body concepts for the first time,
Mm.
listening to this conversation, if they are curious but confused or overwhelmed by where the heck to even start, what would your word of direction or encouragement be to that person?
Yeah. So if someone's really beginning in this, I would, recommend finding one book or one or two voices to follow. I think that's one of my biggest pieces of advice. When I first recovered, it's still not mainstream, but it wasn't as talked about. So, he just said, Alan Gordon said, here's my wiki site. And I just tuned into that wiki program. But what I find now is people get really overwhelmed because it's beautiful to have all these resources, but what
Right.
like Instagram reels and things can do, especially for an obsessive mind, can turn really unhelpful really fast. So, as much as I want to support all the creators and all these things, for someone starting the recovery journey, or even just as you go and you're getting overwhelmed, I would even recommend maybe picking one or two people and muting the rest. You can still follow them and come back to them, but really having some boundaries around how much of this information you're taking in. Let's say take in the information and then get some support. How can you implement one or two of those things, or do you need to have some more people around you to support you? Um,
Yeah, I love that actually. I love that, the simplicity of it. And I know that folks are often wanting to know, but who's the right person to follow? And the truth is, as we were saying, I think probably throughout this conversation, there are no absolutes. If
mhm,
you hear one thing that resonates with you,
mhm.
listen to some more from that person, and that will start to guide you toward whatever the next step is for you.
Yes, and you might just have to go on that journey. I mean, I've thought of times that I've been going through something and I went one route and maybe saw a therapist for a few sessions and I was going in between this like, oh, is it just my fear or is it actually that it's not working? And I just had to make a decision that this doesn't feel as good as this article that I read. So I'm going to move towards how this article was talking about this issue and I'm going to move towards that approach. You just make the best decision you can in the moment, right? And
Yes.
so
And
all
that
we
best decision is more than good enough to bring you
yes,
to the next step. Yeah.
yes, yep. And it'll lead you to where you need to be. And it's not one right place, right? I think I hear clients say a lot, like, what's the key? Or we even use that language, I think, as practitioners. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think there is a key. I think you open doors, right? It's like one key leads to another, leads to another.
Yeah, completely. Um, Lauren, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience with listeners, sharing your time with me. Where can folks find you? And also, what can they reach out to you for? For example, are you taking new clients? Do you work with folks only in the state of your licensure? Do you also do coaching? Do you do group stuff? What can folks reach out to you for?
Yeah. So my website is laurengtherapy.com. And I just made an Instagram and it's just my name at Lauren Garchow. And right now I'm doing individual coaching and therapy. So individual coaching can be for anybody, anywhere. And therapy is for those in California. Most of my services are virtual. I also do walk and talk sessions. So if you live on the east side of Los Angeles, yeah, um, and want to get outside and take a walk with me, then we can do that together.
I love that so much. Yes, I remember you telling me that when we met in person at the PPDA conference, and I was
Yeah.
needing to take many walks to take breaks from all the
Yes.
sitting and listening.
Yeah, I remember finding you outside on one of the lunch breaks and you were taking a mindful walk, and I needed that in that moment as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again. I'll put your info in the show notes so folks can find you easily. And I'm so glad to be in connection with you, and I look forward to staying in contact.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Anna.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening. And until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.